Hey guys, welcome to Huddle. Appreciate you guys taking your time out of your schedule to be here to work on your own leadership. That's what this is about, really. Huddle is an MC for MC leaders, and we want to make sure you're healthy, and we want to help develop you into leaders who are healthy, who know how to lead missional communities in a healthy way. And that's where I want to focus our attention today and tonight is on this topic of leadership. I want to talk about leadership because, as John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership. And what he means by that statement is the success or failure of any team, business, group, or organization is determined by its leadership. As the leaders go, so go the organization. Now, this is, of course, true of missional communities and our church as a whole. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, I know that many of us might push back a little bit on that concept, and I think we might do that for at least two reasons. One, we don't think that we are leaders. But here again, John Maxwell is helpful. He defines leadership as influence. Nothing less, nothing more. And when you think about that, every single human being influences someone. We influence friends, we influence our kids, we influence our co-workers, we influence our spouse, maybe we influence departments at work. We all have influence in some capacity. Therefore, in some capacity, we're all leaders. Okay? Now, the second reason we might push back on the everything rises and falls on leadership is we've seen leadership done poorly, and so we kind of push away from it altogether and just don't want to talk about leadership or don't want to be leaders. Though I understand this reaction, it actually only serves to prove the rule. See, everything rises and falls on leadership. And that means poor leaders, or even evil leaders for that matter, hurt people and organizations, and they will continue to do that until good leaders step up and lead. There is really no such thing as a leaderless world. And I know in our society today, we are kind of pushing back against the hierarchy. We are pushing back against leadership. And we're kind of wanting to be these free-floating individuals that just get to make up their own rules and do their own things. But you can't make a flourishing society out of a bunch of individuals like that without having some leaders in place. So in your missional community won't flourish if it's a bunch of individuals doing individual things. We have to have strong leadership in our MCs, and for my part, I haven't really done a great job talking about leadership because I've pushed away from it. Let's talk about theology, let's talk about getting healthy, let's talk about all these other things, and so I haven't really done much time talking about leadership, and I want to change that in 2019. And I'm starting by doing that tonight. So what I want to do is press into this topic of leadership a little bit to help us become better leaders, specifically discipling leaders, or leaders who know how to make other leaders. They know how to disciple in such a way to make leaders and not just followers. Leaders who know how to develop and disciple others towards Jesus, and in such a way that those people, as they're becoming more, they're closer to Jesus and they're being discipled, they're picking up weight and carrying things and becoming leaders themselves. Now, it's true that not everyone will be a full-fledged leader in your missional community, but a lot of them will. And it seems like one of the key bottlenecks to the growth of our church and to the growth of our missional communities is consistently the developing of leaders. MCs get bigger, but then we don't have a qualified leader or two or whatever, couples to branch off and to multiply and to take these missional communities in new directions. And so we're constantly trying to borrow leaders from this group and borrow leaders from that group and trying to figure things out and use strategy to help us because ultimately we haven't developed the leaders in our own missional community. And though we won't be able to do that all the time, I want us in 2019 to grow at discipling leaders, taking people from members to leaders in our missional community. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the fact that there are reasons why we don't do that, and I'm going to specifically call this 4 types of dysfunctional leaders. I got these from Craig Rochelle, who was talking about 4 dark sides of leadership, but I've tweaked them just a little bit. And here they are. I put them on your paper so you can follow along with me. Number 1 is the controlling leader. Controlling leaders are often immature, insecure, or inexperienced. They don't understand that leadership is about influence, not control. So that's not to say a controlling leader doesn't have good intentions or they're mean or bad or all those things. They're often highly engaged. They often care deeply. They sweat the small stuff and they're about the details. But without trust, they can create a dysfunctional culture. Okay? Now, here's the problem with the controlling leader. Now, probably you've experienced this in a church or at work, in somewhere you've experienced being micromanaged. You've experienced somebody who wants to kind of do everything. Well, the problem with that is controlling leaders create compliant followers, right? They don't develop other leaders, they create compliant followers. They develop their team into a crew of yes people who can't think for themselves. Ron Edmondson says, when you have a controlling leader, leaders leave, because leaders don't want to be controlled, followers stay, and the organization stalls. The application of this point is you can have control or you can have growth, but you can't have both. We are a decentralized church for the most part, with missional communities spread all over the city, and we want that to keep happening. We want people to keep multiplying and going. In order for that to happen, we can't keep a tight control on everything. Now we have to control some things, our theology, the character of their leaders involved, but we need to release the reins a little bit on some things. So first dysfunctional type of leader is the controlling leader. He creates or she creates compliant followers, but not leaders. Number 2, the critical leader. A critical leader often points out what's wrong, but rarely points out what's right. Again, this leader almost always has good intentions behind their actions. They believe to help someone improve, you've got to show them what they did wrong, right? That's true. The problem is critical leaders often produce insecure followers. Critical leadership creates a climate of fear of failure. I'm afraid of saying the wrong things. I'm afraid of doing the wrong things because this leader's just going to point it out, and he's not going to show me evidences of grace and remind me how God's working and where I've come from. And so I'm so afraid of being critiqued that I'm not going to actually become a leader. People second guess themselves and they become afraid to take risks. The application here is the insecure leader gives blame. That's your fault. That's where you screwed up. But the strong leader takes responsibility. Hey man, I'm sorry that I didn't follow through with you on that as well. I'm sorry I didn't describe exactly what I was wanting you to do when we led prayer. Not just, hey man, you didn't lead prayer well this week. But the strong leader takes responsibility and actually says, hey man, that's my fault, my bad. I didn't explain it very well. Let me show you what I'm really looking for. And then obviously show people what they did right and show them what they can do better. Don't just critique them. Number 3, the avoiding leader. This is kind of the opposite of the controlling leader, right? We like decentralized, we want everybody to do their own thing. We don't want to be mean. We don't want to be controlling. We don't want to be a micromanager. And so we fall off the proverbial horse on the other side, right? An avoiding leader just tries not to get involved in the mess, tries not to get involved in the mistakes of other people. And it's not always a problem. Busy seasons and distractions will pop up, but when a leader is generally afraid of confrontation, it becomes a major issue for the whole team. And it becomes a huge issue in missional community because the most talkative person, the person with the most issues, the most insecure person often begins to lead week in and week out. Their issues, their personalities take over, and the avoiding leader can't step in and quiet things, can't step in and direct things, can't say, you know what, that's an issue, we need to deal with this. And so there's always a proverbial elephant in the room that's causing a lot of problems, right? Well, here we go. The problem. The avoiding leader creates disengaged followers. They don't coach, they don't mentor, they don't help. They assume if somebody needs help, they're going to come to them. A team member might be doing well, but they don't know it because their leader refuses to communicate. And if a team member feels like their leader doesn't care, it's difficult for them to care too. Over time, the problem isn't the problem anymore. The problem is actually the leader. It's tough to hear. The application. We can't correct what we're not willing to confront. Confront problems early and solve them quickly. Small problems you ignore generally grow into big problems. That couple with the marriage issue that you just kind of keep avoiding in missional community, you avoiding that is actually going to create a bigger problem down the road. We have to step into it and lead. And lastly, the rescuing leader. This is, we could call this the helicopter leader. It's the helicopter parent, right? This is the opposite of the avoiding or disengaged leader. A rescuing leader dives in and is always ready to help. But sometimes they just plain help too much. They care so much about the people they lead, they start doing all the work for them. This can be people that are like naturally threes that like to get things done. This can be twos that naturally help people, but they lead and they help and they get after it and they do things too much. The problem, and you might have seen this in some family dynamics, like bailing out a family member who's bad at managing their finances, for instance. To the rescuer, this feels good. They feel like they're being Jesus to this person and they're being helpful, but everyone else knows that it's having the opposite effect. It's actually causing the rest of the community never to take responsibility because this one person takes so much responsibility, nobody else needs to take responsibility in the group. So it provides a short-term solution, but it creates a longer-term problem. The application here is once the rescuing stops, true growth can begin. Leaders who truly care about the people they lead will let them fail from time to time so they can learn from their mistakes and improve. That's when team members really begin to develop. And our missional community members, same thing. So when you think about these 4 types of dysfunctional leadership patterns, which one or 2 of them do you battle the most? Controlling, criticizing, avoiding, or rescuing? I want you to go around the room and ask this question, answer this question. And if you don't know, ask your co-leader because your co-leader probably would know, or your spouse might know. And then what I want you to do is looking at the application of that dysfunction, I want you to ask yourself, what do you need to believe about the gospel? And then what change do you need to make in your leadership to better develop the people around you? Would you take 5, 10, 15 minutes, go around the room, discuss these 4 dysfunctional patterns of leadership? I'll see you back in a little bit. Welcome back, guys. Hopefully that was helpful for you in diagnosing some of the issues that you have as a leader. Now, what we want to do is we want to turn now from the kind of the 4 dysfunctions, and we want to turn towards the discipling leader, the leader that we want to become. And as we jump into that, I want to read an extended quote from David Foster Wallace, one of the most famous American novelists of this kind of generation. It's in your packet, I think. You can follow along with me. He says, "It is just about impossible to talk about the really important stuff in politics without using terms that have become such awful cliches that make your eyes glaze over and are hard to even hear. One term is leader, which all the big candidates use all the time, as in providing leadership or a proven leader or a new leader for a new century, and have reduced to such a platitude that it's hard to try to think about what leader really means and whether indeed what today's young voters want is really a leader. The weird thing is that the word leader itself is cliche and boring. But when you come across someone who actually is a real leader, that person isn't cliche or boring at all. In fact, he or she is sort of the opposite of cliche and boring. Obviously, a real leader isn't just somebody who has ideas you agree with, nor is it just somebody you happen to believe is a good guy. Think about it. A real leader is somebody who, because of his own particular power and charisma, and example is able to inspire people, with inspire being used here in a serious and non-cliche way. A real leader can somehow get us to do certain things that deep down we think are good and want to be able to do, but usually can't get ourselves to do on our own. It's a mysterious quality, hard to define, but we always know it when we see it. Even as kids, you can probably remember seeing it in certain really great coaches or teachers or some extremely cool older kid you looked up to and wanted to be just like. Some of us remember seeing the quality as kids in a minister or a rabbi or a scoutmaster or a parent or a friend's parent or a supervisor in a summer job. And yes, all these are authority figures, but it's a special kind of authority. If you've ever spent time in the military, you know how incredibly easy it is to tell which of your superiors are real leaders and which aren't, and how little rank has to do with it. A leader's real authority is a power you voluntarily give him, and you grant him this authority not with resentment or resignation, but happily. It feels right. Deep down, you almost always like how a real leader makes you feel. The way you find yourself working harder and pushing yourself and thinking in ways you could never get to on your own. I love this. This is the succinct sentence here. In other words, a real leader is somebody who can help us overcome the limitations of our own individual laziness and selfishness and weakness and fear, and get us to do better things than we can get ourselves to do on our own. End quote. I think that is an outstanding quote. A leader is somebody who can get us to do the things that we really want to do, things that we can't get ourselves to do on our own, right? To be better, to get after it, to bring healing, to step up and lead. A real leader brings these qualities that are kind of inherent or maybe sleeping inside of us, brings them up to the surface. So how do we do that? How do we become those type of leaders who can see things in somebody else, maybe that are dormant, and bring them to life and bring them up into application into a missional community? Well, I think there's 4 steps to developing leaders through discipleship, and that's what I want us to think about. How do I develop leaders in missional community through discipleship to lead more leaders? Well, first, self-awareness is the first step to growth and development. And human beings are notorious for being self-deceived. I can't tell you how many times people have told me how hardworking, how industrious. I've had people tell me that they're clean freaks, and then they invite me to their house, and their house is an absolute disaster. And they're not clean freaks, nor are they hardworking. They're actually lazy people. But in their mind, they're so self-deceived, they think of themselves as hardworking, right, and not lazy. Now, I'm not just focusing it on any one person. We're all like that in some ways. If you ever used to watch American Idol, there's always people who have convinced themselves they can actually sing, and they're awful, and we laugh at them. Now, we're all like that. Maybe our mom told us we were good at something, and she was lying to us or something, and we've grown up thinking that we can sing, or thinking that we're, really industrious, or that we're really, we're great at leading people, or we're really thoughtful, or we're really connected to our emotions. And the people around us listen to those things and go, bro, you are an emotional cactus, right? You are not connected to your emotions. Or we hear people say, I'm just not very emotional. And we watch this guy get really excited all the time, or really, we see him emotional, and we're like, no, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. You are actually very in touch with your emotions. So the first step in helping people develop into leaders is helping them become self-aware. And the Enneagram is a great opportunity for us to become more self-aware at our weaknesses and at our strengths. But it can't replace your input as a leader in their life. As discipling leaders, we must help people see themselves as they are and not as they perceive themselves to be. And I heard this quote this week: "We owe nothing to anyone's illusions of themselves." So, we want to help people graciously see themselves as they are and see themselves as Christ wants them to be, not as they think they are. So, sometimes in missional community, in a loving way, or even outside of missional community, we need to pop these bubbles that they've got, these ideas of who they are that don't match up with reality. We need to pop those bubbles so that they can grow into the leaders they're called to be. Second thing, as we're developing leaders through discipleship, this is one of the hardest ones for leaders to learn. And if you don't learn it, you're only going to create followers. And it's the hardest one for Christians who've been in the church to learn, I think. And it's this: questions help people grow more than answers do. Now, I'm not saying there's not a time for answering questions. There always is. And there's a time to speak the truth. But you've got to develop the gift that when you're speaking to someone and you're trying to tell them truth and you see their eyes glaze over, you've just lost them. They've disconnected. They can't process the information you're giving them. And that's time to ask a better question. Ask an open-ended question. That the goal here is not to tell them what they need to hear or dump advice on them. It's far more helpful to ask questions that draw them out and lead people to their own discovery of the truth. If you tell somebody something, a lot of times it goes in one ear and out the other, and they don't really get it, and they don't apply it. But if you can ask good questions and they discover the truth on their own, they're far more likely to retain that information and actually apply it to their life. Again, this is why when Jesus was talking with the woman at the well, he said, "Woman, where is your husband?" Right? Open-ended question. He didn't say, "Don't you think the man you are with now is an idol in your life?" I've heard so many people say that kind of thing to somebody. Don't you think that's an idol in your life? You're telling somebody you're asking a question, but you're not asking a good question. You're asking a yes or no question. It's kind of shutting things down. If you want to develop leaders, lead them to the truth by asking good questions. Okay? Third, people will not listen to us or follow us unless they trust us. Okay? And trust is a hard thing to earn. Many people don't give us trust until we earn it. Even though in missional community, we want trust to be given. We don't want it to be earned. The way to develop trust or build trust is a simple formula. Gospel plus safety plus time. Okay? Ray Ortlund came up with that little equations. This is what he says. Listen, quote, "People need multiple exposures to the happy news of the gospel from one end of the Bible to the other." Now, I'm going to expand on that. People need the gospel every single week you gather together. They need to see you apply the gospel to somebody's marriage, somebody's financial needs, somebody's idolatry with money, with sex. They need to hear the gospel give reason why we eat together. They need to hear the gospel give reason why we eat good food together, why we go out on mission, why we open up our homes to one another, why we open up our hearts and lives to one another. The people need every story, every lesson you learn, every Bible study. Everything needs to come back to the gospel. People need the gospel beat in their head week in and week out, on Sunday mornings, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, whatever it is. And so we need to be gospel fluent, okay? But we also need safety. Now, safety is, let me just read what he says here. The safety of non-accusing sympathy so that they can admit their problems honestly. We don't want to be sin nitpickers, nor do we want to be idol hunters all the time. We want to create a space that's open, that people can open up about their sin and their struggles, and they know they're going to get the gospel. They're not going to get advice. They're not going to get shamed or guilt piled upon them. They're not going to get legalism. Here's a bunch of things you have to do. So we want to create this space that is safe, that people can open up and share their problems. And the primary way we do that, leaders, is by sharing our own problems, sharing our own weaknesses, letting the group speak into us. If we're never letting the group speak into us, then we're not creating a safe place, and we're definitely going to be creating followers and not leaders. And then the last thing they need time, right? Enough time to rethink their lives at a deep level, because people are complex and changing is not easy. Gospel plus safety plus time in a missional community, that's how we build trust. Okay. Fourth, leaders are developed in missional community and in the missional community gathering, not in a classroom. Therefore, here's the deal. We must hand off responsibility to those in our missional community. We must hand off prayer. We must hand off mission. We must hand off teaching when we can. We must hand off these responsibilities so that our emerging leaders can actually grow. They have room to fail so that you can come and correct them when they fail, and they have enough room to succeed so that they see, you know what, they're giving me the opportunity to practice right now with them in the room so they can help me, so one day I can lead a missional community down the line. Now, Craig Groeschel said something that I found very helpful. He said this: leaders are not a means of getting things done. Many of us look at our missional community and say, oh, everything's getting done, don't worry about it, I'm fine. No. Leaders are not just a means of getting things done. Listen, rather, the things that need to get done are a means for developing leaders. So sometimes we need to create things that need to get done to give them to people who are emerging as leaders so that they can grow in their ability to lead well. And that might mean we stop doing, even though we're fully capable of leading prayer and the lesson every week, we're not going to do that to create a vacuum in our missional community so that other younger leaders can learn how to lead and learn how to operate as leaders with us in the room, okay? So we must call our emerging leaders into leadership. We have to invite them to carry responsibility as a way to develop them into the people that they wish to be, right? They want to be more fluent in the gospel. Okay, then have them lead out one of the conversations, right? Have them explain the gospel when they're doing gospel community mission during the prayer time, right? Create new avenues for these leaders to practice what they want to grow in, right? Let them know it's okay to mess up. That's not a big deal. We all mess up. You're going to help correct them, and keep reminding them of the gospel. But also give them room and give them vision that, hey, you know what? I think you can lead a missional community someday. I want you to lead a missional community in 6 months. Oh, I don't know. I don't think I'm ready for that. Well, just keep praying about it, because I think we are going to be ready about it. We have to be pushing people towards this as leaders. Now, as we close, of these 4 steps, which one do you need the most work on to become a better developer and discipler of leaders? And then the next question, how are you going to address this weakness? What are you going to do about it, right? What are you going to do about it? Go around the room, discuss this. How can you most grow as a leader in the next few months? Thank you for taking this time out, guys. I love you. I pray that this was fruitful. I will talk to you soon. God bless.